Okay, welcome to the stage, David Roberts and the filmmaker Stuart Clarfield.
Thank you all for coming. That's the main thing. Thank you very much.
And thank you for sharing this film with us. I think it does a really good job of capturing both the energy and essence of the market, but also the fear of what might be coming, or what is coming, really. So can you tell us a little bit more about your inspiration, why now, and what you were trying to capture in this film?
Sure. So the film began a bunch of years ago, but I started seeing a bunch of legacy stores closing. There were Portuguese bakery. There were a few stores that had been there for 30 and 40 years. And I thought to myself, wow, we're going to lose the stories of these families and just, how they got started in the legacy pillars of the market. And at the same time, so there was something I wanted to get started on, and at the same time, someone I knew at Ryerson, or at TMU in radio and television arts, called me and she said, we have a bunch of students who want to work on a documentary. Will you take on interns? And I said, well, I don't have anything for them to work on. And I started thinking about it, and I said, well, maybe we should do something with Kensington. And this is long and drawn out, but there's a reason for it. So to get these interns, we decided to get an office at the church at St. Stephen's, who allowed us to have one little space. And we started just doing crowdfunding and research and shooting a few interviews. And Maggie, who's in the film, said to me, there's going to be a meeting around a condo development on Thursday, and you've got to be there. And I said, what? She goes, yeah, we have meetings. There's a lot of development. There's a lot of things going on. Be at the meeting. So we shot the meeting. And then we started following multiple meetings with this one condo development. And then I think Maggie said to me, next week there's going to be an emergency meeting for tenants because everyone's getting rent-evicted and booted out of their place. And I said, okay. So we followed that. And then we met a bunch of people there. So to answer the question, it was initially around history and just capturing the stories of the market, but it was at a moment in time where development and gentrification were speeding up so quickly, and we were in a place we couldn't help but see it, and then we started following that. So the film kind of evolved over time, and it wasn't initially meant to capture this moment where Toronto really was transitioning from what we've known for decades as having a space for everyone, no matter how poor or working class or whatever. There's a space for you too. There's no space unless you really can come up with a lot of money. And then, so we tried to balance three things: being in real time and being in the market so people get a feel for the market, going into places and getting a bit of backstory on 160 years of history, and then going forward to what's going on now, what the implications are. And that took years to try to figure out on the editing side. We shot 75 hours of material that ended up being an hour and 40 minutes. So it was tough to try to sculpt it, but that's the story of the film, making of it.
Okay, so I'm gonna expose some of my biases in terms of the hope that I have for Kensington Market. Dominique, who plays a central role, has been a long-time collaborator, co-conspirator, partner with the Urban Studies program, and has done amazing work to really find creative and really meaningful ways to ward off some of the foreboding fear that's there in the film. And so from my work with her and the work that I get to watch her and Maggie and others do in Kensington Market, I have a real hope that gel that one of the last people mentioned of Kensington Market is still alive and well. Is that your feeling?
Yes, and well, multiple things. So Dominique, who is the friend of Kensington Market, is one of the founders of the Kensington Market Community Land Trust, who's now trying to get properties and keep them accessible for folks and affordable. I have two comments around that. When we started making this film, I thought it was about Kensington Market, and very soon I thought, just replace the words Kensington Market with Toronto, because Kensington's a mirror to Toronto, and what they were worried about in Kensington is everywhere, right? So So my hope, there are two things in that question. My hope is that the city I was lucky enough to grow up in and live in for many decades that allowed all of us to come together and share it, and had kind of just space enough, just enough space for all of us to find our place in, will continue to be that city going forward. That's my great hope. Kensington is the heart of that people city. And there's a couple of statements made in the film, and the essence of it still sticks with me, which is one of the last things Ozzy says. He says, this was created by the people. This was made by the people. It was made out of sometimes panic. It was made out of need. It was made out of utility. And because people needed a way to live, they found a way to live. And so I'm going to stick with that hope that people will find a way. But in the case of real estate values and assets, at the end of the day, it's within democracy. It comes with a free capitalism, and it's really tough to keep people from profiting. Like, you're not going to stop that. So, and it's cycles of up and down. So I've got to say, I still don't have the answer that in the face of great success, how you slow that down to allow people to have a space. I think to myself that a really good recession would be awesome for Kensington, because it would be. But the one thing that I really like seeing recently is the number of people who just put up tables on the sidewalk without permission, or maybe with permission, but the richness of people finding a way to just do their thing in Kensington is actually mushrooming, because they can't afford the stores. And there's a few stores now that are almost like flea market co-ops where there is dozens of people within one store. So my hope is that people will find a way, and that the cycles of this endless success for Toronto will slow down to the point that there'll be enough space that we can enjoy People City for many, many more years. I mean, that's my great hope.
So I'm guessing most of the footage was filmed before COVID.
It was.
What does
before
that mean for your film? Like, how can you bring us to the present day in terms of what you're seeing in Kensington Market?
Well, the funny thing is the meanings keep changing all the time. There was an innocuous comment that Tom says, which is, "Oh, my dad came here, and I was in." He didn't say it, but this is what he means. He was in Hungary for 10 years while his father came here and opened a store in Kensington, and then he came here 10 years later, and he says that one comment, which is, I wanted to come to America, Canada, America, it's the same thing. But so the only reason I bring this up is that the meaning of this film and little things within it stay the same in some cases, and other things change. I think, the cycle we were in, the real estate prices were going up so quickly, and the interest rates were so low, and the amount of speculation going on, you couldn't lose. Mm-hmm. So things were churning so quickly, and now we're in the opposite real estate market. But that said, the store, I don't want to talk out of turn, but there are corner stores in Kensington that are asking $25,000 a month. So, we're looking at Mare complaining that her rent's $3,000 or other expenses, and she had a little store, and she couldn't. It was a tiny little store, and she couldn't afford it. But when I talk to some folks about the rents that they're asking for and charging, you would be astounded. So, one of the things that's not in here that is a current issue is the speed with which stores are changing. Where someone comes in, they put in a couple of months of rent. After 4 or 5 months, they can't make the rent. They disappear overnight, and the rotation on vacancies is really speeding up because who can afford those rents? So you've got that on one side, and then you've got a lot of people who say, "I'm hanging my T-shirts up on the fence, and I'm putting out a thing," and they're running their businesses and surviving and building culture and community and bringing new innovation to the market because they have to and they want to, and that people spirit is why this place existed, and I'm hoping it continues.
So I'm going to ask one more question, and then we'll open it up. So if you have a question, raise your hand, and we'll get you a mic in just a moment. There's an interesting shadow, I guess, of the University of Toronto throughout the film. Can you say a little bit more about that relationship between Kensington Market, gentrification, and change, and sort of the university itself?
Yeah, I mean, it's self-evident in terms of the material, but the funny thing is, once again, 12 months ago, 18 months ago, the Liberal government went, oh, this immigration wave we've been on and having tons of foreign students coming in, and universities enriching themselves dramatically through charging foreign students huge amounts of money compared to what they're getting for domestic students, is a business model that they were really ripping on and doing great. And now things have turned around, and we're now in an era, since the film's been released in October, where certain colleges are closing programs, and the turn on serving that market segment has been quick. So all that to say, one of the reasons why I like film, and even right from the very beginning of doing it, is I think it is a historical document, and that there's sociological value just in pointing a camera. It used to be very exclusive when I started, where you shot film and you'd look at a film strip and go, oh, that's so cool, look at that street sign or those cars. And now, of course, everyone shoots a feature film on their phone every day. It's not the same, but I do think that this is a piece of history, and as time goes on, it becomes less relevant to the moment, but again, my biggest concern is that we keep Toronto, hopefully, we keep those values that what's interesting to me is, and one of the questions of the film is, why is it, sorry, I'm back up. When I was about 15, my grandparents immigrated here, they lived in the market, and great-grandparents. My parents were born in the market. I grew up in the suburbs, but when I was about 15, and I knew about the market and all that, but when I was about 15, I walked down into the market and went to Courage My Love and thought, this place is magic. And it's been many decades, and that same vibe has continued. And I've always wondered, why? How is it that this has been passed along? And I'm hoping the film shares some of that. And it's really unexplainable how resident to resident, store owner to store owner, customer to customer, that the vibe of feeling welcomed in that market, people feel it, and people feel the magic to be themselves. It's incredible. So all that to say, I hope that happens in Toronto too, that somehow we keep that inclusivity as one of the pillars of this community, and it doesn't get wiped out by financial success or other things, that we pass that along and insist on it. And that'll keep it alive, just like somehow magically it's been kept alive in Kensington. That's my hope. Can I shout out somebody in the back row? Tao, stand up, man. There he is from Kensington Melodies in the film. Thank you. One of the big supporters of the film. When you walk down Baldwin, you'll always see a poster for the film in front of his store. Thanks for coming. And second time in this, we did our first preview of the film. The first time this was shared with the public was in this room in October. Yeah. And hopefully, thank you. And I want to shout out one other person, two other people. Lee Harrison. I'm going to embarrass you. You got to stand up, man. This guy I roped into my first student film 43 years ago. And so thank you for coming, Lee. We'll put you in the next one, too. And my partner and co-producer in life is Alana Richmond, who's in the back row there, and thank you. When we did our first preview here, we had to set up drinks and food in the lobby, so she had to leave like 15 minutes before the end of the film. And of course, I wanted to thank her, and she wasn't even in the room. I thanked her anyways, but she had to hear it from her friends that it actually happened. So, anyways, do you want to do a question from the audience?
Yeah, so we have a few minutes, so definitely have some time for some questions. Somebody will bring you a mic.
Just a quick question. Was there any effort made to interview members of the BIA the business improvement area, because I'm sure they have an interesting perspective to bring on how businesses come in and leave and that kind of stuff.
Good question. I'm sure that some of the folks that we interviewed are participatory in the BIA or in the BIA. I've got to say that we didn't officially approach him at the outset, but they actually, it's a side story, when the film was done, they wanted to show it to the neighborhood, as I did, and we got a projector and put it in the middle of the street and showed the film on Pedestrian Sunday. So the BIA's been super supportive. Again, pardon my ignorance. I'm sure some of the folks that are in the film have been on the BIA or were on the BIA. We didn't officially ask for that position, though. We probably should have.
There's one in the middle and then one up front. I guess we can go here first.
It's on. Thank you for doing such an onerous job for the Kensington. 40 years I lived close to that neighborhood. 40 years I shopped in that neighborhood. I know pretty much everybody who's in the film, and God rest their souls, some of them are no longer with us. So thank you for that. I do believe it is a historical film, so I would love to see if it's, on your website or whatever, some of that B-roll will also be a wonderful homage to these people. I'm wondering, well, couple of things. Love for you to do the same thing for Little Italy, Little Portugal, because they're in trouble. But Joe Cressy is no longer there. Yeah. Do you know if the current counselors are as supportive as Joe was of Kensington Market?
I'm going to throw it to you.
No, this is the shortest answer. I think it's a more complicated relationship, in part because of issues around encampments and tensions with the leadership of the church, but and other things. But I would say I don't know that we have a counselor like Joe Cressy in the current council.
I think it's Diane Sachs right now. So, but all that said, and so my history with the market does go back quite a ways, even on the activist side. We've had many folks, so Olivia Chow, Jack Layton, they lived on Huron, but super supportive. Rosario Marchese, who was an MPP for Ontario. Generally, people love the market and want to support it, but they get caught. They're caught in multiple ways. Again, I'm not speaking on behalf of Urban Studies. I'm just a citizen, just a regular person who's observed some stuff. But the battle between the municipality and the city trying to impose an urban plan and the province saying we're going to give developers a side route around that has been an issue because that's the reality, the OMB. And then the reality of capitalism is capitalism. So, if somebody inherits a property that their parents bought in the 1920s or 30s or 40s for $11 and now someone wants to give them $4 million, they're going to take it. Or if someone, if a real estate agent goes to someone who's had a long-time tenant at $2,000 and they say, I can get you 20, there's very few people in the system that say, forget it, we're going to keep the 2. Like, it does happen. There are people like that, actually. But back to this thing around, having observed it, there are things that you think are legislative, but there seems to be enough wiggle room that a lot of people make their way around it. So again, this the thing of cycles of the economy and people just finding a way is the thing. Is like basically it's a marginal neighborhood. Its richest cultural moments comes out of its financial marginalization. And its greatest threat is success financially. So it's this strange thing, but it's managed to get through it. But it's very it's complicated to predict. But again, you just have to hope that people find a way.
In the red in the middle here.
Thanks. Hi. I was curious to know if you had interviewed any of the residents of Kensington Market who are students or younger residents who don't have a generational connection through their parents or grandparents to the neighborhood?
Yeah, I mean, again, the biggest problem we had is we have 75 hours of material and we had to truncate so much. But to answer your question, one of the younger folks was Luis, who ran the barber shop, who was a young entrepreneur who had opened that up in an apartment. It was this backroom barbershop thing. We interviewed a whole bunch of people who were being impacted and thrown out of their place. We have a lot of this stuff, and back to it's such a rich market and there's so many people and time to share in, but the thing was just running too long. I had to lift probably the 8 minutes I love the most out of this film, which is all the art and music and culture. Courage, My Love, Kensington sound, graffitis, the whole vintage neighborhood, all of that was so important to me, and I just went at a point in time we have to move it forward. So all that to say, we do have an old school DVD, and we add clips there. We have a YouTube channel. We'll put stuff up there. Probably pretty soon, the next month or two, we'll start putting a lot more stuff up so that you can see just more of a 360-degree piece. But just if I could reflect their voice, I mean, even younger people without generational history instantly get the vibe of the market and they love it. And they're like, I'm never leaving. Or this, I had a friend who's been in this city. He's from Vancouver. He moved here like 40, 50 years ago. And I heard him say, if something happens to Kensington, I'm moving out of the city. And I was shocked. I didn't know he even had that association. So I think every one of us that are here, you're not coming for me. You're coming for Kensington. And we all have this strong feeling. So I think even young people get the eclectic vibe, the inclusive vibe, the artistic vibe, the freedom to just be who you are, the human thing, the people thing. So I think that they feel the same way, but I think they're probably just as they are right through the downtown, intimidated by how are they going to stay and have a job that's going to pay for crazy rent or ever buy a place. And in fact, the one thing I will say, if you don't mind me talking endlessly, is Courage, My Love. One of the things when we interviewed them at length, it's Patricia and Stuart, who are a couple, and they own a house or two. They said the reason, where you see stores that never change, including theirs, it's because they bought the place. They don't have to deal with the pressure of leases being renewed. But younger people coming in are going to be intimidated, I think, if they're trying to start a business, but now they're finding new ways to do it. So we're good. Listen, I didn't mean to make the film totally depressing, but I also couldn't make a puff piece around, Kensington's great, everything's awesome. It was like, Kensington's great, and we have to appreciate it and work for it to keep it in many different ways, and that's why I try to keep that piece.
So in the back, maybe here? Yeah. Sorry, Cheryl.
I'll even talk standing up. Stuart, some people came here to see just you. So there you go, just so you know. Quickly, my first time Kensington Market was with your brother, lied to my parents, said I was going to Yorkdale, and went down with them. You created a film that is desperately needed at these times. It is beautiful. And one of the things with those 75 hours that you recorded, what was sort of the biggest surprise? I had all kinds of surprises through this, but for you, what was that one that was just like, wow, I never knew that?
I've got to say, one of the things that's great for me to make this a film on Kensington is I could go down and shoot anytime I wanted, which is for a filmmaker, and it's pretty much interesting all the time. A couple things that happened there were many things that were surprises. The bubble dance, the slow motion, the dancing in the street with the bubble machine, I just turned and looked like that was just something that happened, it was not by design. It was just a miracle. That funeral scene of them walking down the street with that coffin, I think I read an article, I saw something online saying that there's going to be some protest and it's going to be,
you know, here at this time. And I drove down, parked my car, walked out, and they were right on Baldwin. And so there were lots of things that I really enjoyed that just happened, that allowed for some texture, that was not just straight, you know, talking head interview. But there was Kensington's, you know, Kensington, he's not kidding, as you know. Kensington's magic. All the best things you plan for often don't bring about the things that you think are going to be there, and then the surprises that emerge sometimes can be really cool, and Kensington allowed for it, and the fact I'm local and could just literally be there a lot, and through the years, the things that just happened by accident were really a lot of fun. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, go ahead. It's fine. Yeah. And we'll get to you next.
I don't mean to hog the attention. I just want to make a comment. My first visit to, well, my second visit to Toronto was from Montreal in about 1983. My sister was living here. She took me down to the market. And I remember we went to a place called the Hungry Thai, which is a combination Hungarian and Thai restaurant. I've never heard of such a thing. And it's still there. And we went to the cheese store. Went to the cheese store at Baldwin and Kensington Market. I believe that's still there. And that was 83. And so these are really anchors, okay, in the market that are still there. And I know that recognizing there's a lot of change. The other thing I wanted to say was I didn't quite agree with Maggie Helwig's comment about the student influx. I mean, I've been a student in residence, and that building, even though it may not fit with the physical scale of the area, is not right in the market. But what it does do is it gives students a place to live and have a communal experience, but it also offers, you know, an influx of young people in the market for however long they're there. And I think that was missing from what she said.
I can maybe add just a little context to the student building. I think part of the challenge with a lot of these new buildings is that they aren't built for affordable housing. They're really built on the back of charging the highest dollar for pretty small spaces. So definitely, I think it's great to have more influx of young folks. I work with them every day and often usher them into the market for all kinds of different things. But I think we also have to think about what's lost when affordability is lost, even if it's for students or for anybody really, for that matter. So I think it's a complex issue for sure. In the green hoodie here, and then we'll get you after that. Yeah. So start here. Yeah.
Just thinking about it, there must be many, many cities worldwide that have a similar problem, trying to preserve historical parts of the city. So one is, are there lessons that we can learn from them? And the second thing, if thinking about how we could counteract the commercialism, what if there's a not-for-profit organization that basically buys Kensington property and sets the rules? I would be willing to buy a share of that. And you just need a couple of 5,000 people, each investing 1,000, or say 9,000, 1,000. You got $9 million.
Well, I can help you do just that, because the land trust is fundraising, and so you can invest in the land trust, which is doing exactly that. So land trust is looking at both residential and commercial gentrification, so trying to preserve spaces that are affordable both for people to live as well as for businesses. It's expensive, right, because you have to extract the property from the commercial market, but they are going strong and continue to build, and they will take your money for sure if you're interested in investing.
Back to the first part. Are there lessons that we can learn from other cities?
I mean, I think there are, for sure. But I think the tensions in the film are the same everywhere. That we run a risk of heritage preservation that creates Disneylands of places. Like, I think part of the essence of Kensington Market is that it's changed quite a bit over the 150 years. And in that change, or even longer, right? In that change, there's still been this gel that's maintained. And I don't think, like, it's hard for cities to externally preserve that as governments. And so it really does take the Maggies and the Dominiques and the other people that are in that film of the world creating things like land trusts or other ways of preserving culture, because the lessons are going to be somewhat applicable, but there's also something unique about Kensington Market that can't just be replicated or can't just be saved because Seattle was able to do it or Berlin was able to do it, right? So, yeah, I mean, I think there's things to learn for sure, but there's also something different that keeps Kensington Market alive.
Yeah, and the only comment, again, I'm not a professional in the area, but I went recently to New York in November, and we went to the East Village, we went to the West Village and Little Italy, and some of the areas, I've known through the years, and I was actually shocked by how much of the built form was completely the same.
Yeah.
And I was like, wow, this is incredible. Like 2 stories, 3 stories, everywhere. And then I looked at some of the stores, and they were the most expensive, exclusive, these little, on Mott Street, and what I remember, I've been to New York off and on through many, many decades. But the gentrification aspect has just booted out the people who were in the neighborhood, and now it's just extremely, high-end restaurants and jewelry boutiques and fashion boutiques. So I think there are 2 things for me anyways. The built form matters to me. And Kensington has a couple of things that are structural that helped make it what it was. Surprisingly, it's a neighborhood made up of mostly one-way streets. There's single lanes of traffic, they're narrow, you don't look 2 ways. It's not built for cars in the same way that most neighborhoods are. And it's a residential neighborhood. The Village, I know you've heard it, but a Village popped out of what was built only for homes. And so you get that vibe. Even though there's a store there, your brain tells you, oh, this is a house. Like, oh, I can walk in the front door, I'm welcome here. And I think there's something subliminal that goes on when you take residential neighborhoods and make them commercial and they're narrow streets, and you put a lot of people feel comfortable. They don't know why, but it's partly, I think, the built form. So I think it would be nice to have clusters, just as Paris or London and other cities have said we are not allowing our historical built form to get paved, which helps, because I think also history is a dialogue. Again, it's not fact, it's just an opinion that when you're in a place that's aged and many generations have happened, there's some weird dialogue that goes on between, oh, I'm standing in the place that 50 years ago, 80 years ago, 100 years ago, 500 years ago, it's the same kind of weird human experience of nature, built form, and people. Even though it's not the same time, there's something that goes on there that I think it at least makes you think about that continuity of handing off. And, a 60-story condo that's glass and steel does not emanate any of that. And so my hope is that we have clusters. If we require a lot of housing and we need 50-story condos and we need to build 30 of them, you'll figure it out with green space and blah, 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 but there are clusters for that. If there are clusters of small scale, human scale, built form, that we can keep that and make that viable, that's useful too. And I guess that's my hope for Kensington. But we really need a good recession to keep it affordable, because it ain't gonna stay that way.
Yeah, for sure. So we have time for 2 more questions. We'll start with this person here.
Thank you for your, oh, great. Thank you for your question. I think you set me up. With this great product that you've created, which is a great document to use, is there any opportunity to take it to council and make Kensington a landmark heritage site so that it could be, if this is such a landmark in the community and we do protect our heritage sites, what would be stopping this from becoming a heritage site? I don't know the urban planning. That's your...
Yeah. What would stop this, or why can't the Kensington Market be declared a heritage site? I think that is largely the initiative of the councillor. So there has been a pretty significant heritage designation of the Danforth, for example. So there's already precedent, and that's fairly new, of a whole area of town being declared as heritage. Heritage is not the most effective designation in the city. It largely protects the facades of buildings rather than the entire building or their use. So I think we have to have more robust conversations than just declaring it a heritage site. It would prevent some of the changes, but it really wouldn't prevent a lot of them. You can look at, say, Yorkdale, for example, as lots of built form that's similar, but the use is totally changed, right? So,
yeah, my belief is that that preservation and that heritage designation has happened. But again, there's certain aspects to that built form, and there's certain exclusions, and there's certain ways around it. So again, I think the built form, I think that a lot of it has been, or they're trying to protect it, and they have. But Spadina is not part of that. And they're already building condos. I've been heard talk of, there's a developer who just floated an idea that would chew up the whole thing from Dundas to St. Andrews, all of Spadina, the parking lots it would hover right over. They also own about 7 or 8 houses on the east side of Kensington Avenue. Like, once you start seeing stuff like that, it does Disneyfy it, and it turns it into commercial zone, and it changes the vibe. Again, we can't stop time. And we can't stop capitalistic use of real estate. I'm going to throw this out there too, which is the encampment at St. Stephen's, the encampment in the park. As much as you might say, and for all those of us who are middle class or are not used to that kind of living and being adjacent to it, that is probably the most preservation forward and positive to Kensington, because it enforces that people who are homeless or poor feel at home there and they're going to be there, which makes all the people trying to commercialize and turn it into the next Yorkville very uncomfortable. Yeah. So it brings down property prices, it brings down rent prices, and so, but that weird forces, like the up and down forces, again, Kensington was not a great address to have in 1925. It was a bunch of 8 families living in a house because they were dirt poor and they didn't speak English. Like, it was a marginal neighborhood. And then during, periods of, I guess, the 80s and 90s, there were a lot of crack houses and there were a lot of empty stores, and it was a rough neighborhood at many times. So, sometimes what we see as bad for, the upward trajectory of the classes is what makes the neighborhood viable for everybody, which is what the character is. So it's complicated, I think.
So one last question in the back, and then we will sort of have to wrap up, unfortunately.
Thank you again, everyone, for coming. I really appreciate it. And for inviting us to do it.
Thank you so much, Stuart. It's a wonderful thing. I'm a student here at the U of T doing PhD, but study of religion. So naturally, I'm thinking about a question I asked you is, I know the Kensington Market kind of started from a Jewish immigrant. And how much Jewishness is still there, like based on your research and interviews? That's question 1. Question 2, what would you do differently if you have a 75 hours footage, or if you can have another 75-hour footage? What would you do differently? I know the first one is like championing, the survival of neighborhood. This is a dominant theme, right? But if you could do it slightly differently, what other angles you would bring into the production? Thank you.
Well, the first question is, in my estimation, actually the film's going to be played at the Toronto Jewish Film Festival in June. And what's interesting about it is I don't see it really as a Jewish film, but they're playing it there. But the interesting part, to me anyways, is the vibe of inclusiveness. So the Jewishness I'm going to talk about as a cultural thing. So if you think about thousands of people who came from Eastern Europe who didn't speak the language, didn't dress the right way, had the wrong religion, and had they just had no roots in this country and needed to figure out something. So the market existed for 50 years before they showed up, 40 years, as really a site of Toronto was a suburb for, basically UK immigrants. So what I think, what I'll define as the Jewishness of the market is the culture of folks needing to find a way to make it on their own, and then find a way in a new country, and then because they had it hard, for some reason, they decided to be nice to the next group of immigrants that showed up and said, hey, we need a place to live, or we need a place to work. And it's in the film, and somehow that vibe kept going. So I would say, for me, that to me is a really Toronto thing. And I think regardless of religion, regardless of where you orient yourself or when you showed up, as a city, I still think, it's my hope, that vibe is still there, that we don't, I've lived in Boston, I've lived in other places where they've got a deeper history, and neighborhoods do not allow themselves to be watered down by people out of their culture. And they send that message, like, hey, this is an Irish neighborhood, this is an Italian neighborhood, this is this neighborhood, and they make it very unfriendly. And I came from Toronto going, what the hell are you talking about? It's like, Toronto, there's none of that. Like, there's very little of that. I shouldn't say there's none of that. But I think if there's anything about, again, what you're calling the Jewishness of the market, I think the outsider who found a place is a vibe that still continues. And I think magically it's still there. And if the Jews were the first outsiders who made Kensington their neighborhood, then that's the thing that's continued. I think there's still a couple of synagogues that struggle to get enough people to come in there and use it. Like, I don't think there's a lot of Jewish cultural center left there, quite honestly. And the other thing, what would I do differently? I wouldn't say everything. Like, to me, it's like saying, like being a photographer and you point your camera at a certain point in time, and that's what you were capable in that time. I likely would have taken a few more conventional means of following single people further and deepening maybe your connection into what they're going through, but then it would be a different film. So I think I'm cool with it. It's definitely an imperfect film, and there's many different ways to approach it. But I just accept the fact that I'm not a perfect filmmaker, and this was what we did with what we had at the time.
One of the themes of the film is the inherent change that's built into Kensington. And one of the ways in which we connect to the past in the film is by photographs of the past, which is all we have of that time before, and then the recollections of the older inhabitants. So I would say part of the gift you've given people in the film is now we have this cinema-based record of it at a moment in time. And this will be very important to people in the future as they think about Kensington as it was right now. And so whatever happens to it is going to be balanced against what you've delivered here. So I think we would all want to thank you for that.